Hello, world of nodes. Oh my gosh, this has already been an incredible event. We're only 1/3 of the way through. But as you know, around the entire planet, we have people dialing in, calling in, connecting to the video feed and watching so many great sessions, from Ben Lorica's opening keynote to lots of great information about the product-centered things, and then what people are doing out in the field, what you all are doing out in the field with Gen AI and with graphs and all the amazing things you guys are building. It's been really great. I'm ABK of Neo4j. I'm sitting here on the couch with my friend Emil of Neo4j, the CEO of Neo4j. Yeah?
I'm the CEO of Emil, and I'm the CEO of Neo4j. I'm the master of both domains.
Both domains are well within your sphere. This is our Q&A session to cap off what we've been hearing over the last many hours, and thinking about what are the big topics that you guys have in mind, reflecting on that. We've got some questions in a Slido that we're going to go through some of those. And as we're talking, if you have some more questions that come to mind, you can go to in the sessions. You'll find that there's a public chat on the side. If you go to the top of that chat, there's a pinned message that has a link to what's called a Slido, where you can ask new questions. We'll see those pop up here, and hopefully we'll have time to get to them. So maybe we should just get right into it. Or actually, Emil, introduce yourself first.
Yeah, so hi everyone, fantastic to be here. I guess this is primarily kind of the Asia time zone folks who've dialed in. So you are a few hours ahead of us, and I've not yet been able to catch up with any of the sessions, except I watched Ben Lorica's keynote, but it's morning here in Europe. So I'm super excited to dig into all the next, I guess, 16 hours or something like that,
yeah,
of content between kind of the European focused and then the Americas focused. And it's going to be super interesting. We've done this now for 5 years, and I'm really looking forward to it. So who am I? My name is Emil. I'm the CEO of both Emil and Neo4j. I'm one of the founders. There's 3 founders of Neo4j. I'm one of them. Famously sketched the property graph model on a napkin on the way to Bombay, which is a gross oversimplification of how that actually happened. I played a part of it, but only one out of many people. But have been with Neo4j obviously since the beginning. It's coming up on 15 years now. Have devoted really my life to making sure that developers can build better applications and build applications better by using relationships in data. I'm a developer by kind of heart and background and training, though these days I write more code in Google Slides than I do in reality, probably, but still love being hands-on with new technologies, and in particular graph technologies.
So if you have questions that maybe you're thinking about right now, Python package questions, maybe not how do I get the dependencies resolved? Maybe those are not good for you. But technology questions, sure. Definitely about graph things, about Gen AI, that's going to come up for sure. And even if you're interested, if you're developers out there, if you have a startup mindset, if you're an entrepreneur, maybe some insights, because this is you've taken this from open source project to fledgling company, okay, this seems like a cool idea, onto where we are today with a conference like this around the world, right? So questions away, please. All right.
But before that though,
yeah,
let's kind of flip the script as well. Who are you? You introduce yourself as ABK, right? But you've been with the company for 418 years.
Slightly less time than you have, and in many different capacities. And as you know, from the beginning, so I joined Neo4j in the early days when pretty much everyone did a little bit of everything. Hands on keyboard coding.
Employee number 10, maybe?
Employee 10-ish, that's right. Bit of coding, bit of outward bound, marketing, such as it was at the time. Spend some time in a product. If you have used Neo4j browser, if you use desktop, if you use Bloom, those are all products that I created. And now I'm with developer relations, because through all of that, the story was really that, okay, I want to get developers to engage with Neo4j. And first that was through the technology itself, But now it's like through like, okay, actually let's spend time with developers, outreach events and things. So I also do birthday parties.
Yes.
So if you want me to come to a birthday party and talk about graphs, let's book something. Yeah? Okay, cool. So let's get to the questions we've got. Unsurprising, there's going to be a lot of things about Gen AI, so let's just get right to that one. Gen AI continues to be a hot topic for everyone, and yeah, we've been hearing a lot about that throughout the session so far. But then we hear this evidence that out in the world, companies are stuck in pilot projects. I think there's been some like Gartner reports or something about that, right? So what do you think are holding people back from getting all the way to production?
Yeah. There's been a ton of surveys and stuff like that about this. I'm sure Gartner has proclamations about it. I read through the IBM CEO and CIO survey that they did. It's a very robust survey in particular kind of enterprise centric. So not so much startups, obviously, since it's kind of IBM's customer base equivalent. Who knows the exact precision of the numbers, but some order of magnitude, like 70-80% of projects are stalled in the piloting phase of Gen AI projects, right? And I think there's a number of things going on there. One is, I think we all have a sense of the amazing new capabilities that these models give us. But there's also, like with any new technology, like what do you actually use it for? What works today? What delivers value today, right? And I don't think there's as much clarity on that yet. I also see that there's a lot of push, kind of top-down push on, we need an AI story, right? From the CEO who like needs to tell Wall Street that they have an AI story. And that ultimately gets handed off to a technical team that is tasked to build something with Gen AI, but what specifically? Well, it's not always as clear. Well, maybe we'll do a chat bot on top of our support portal. They start with that, right? And sometimes that's the right approach. Sometimes that's the real kind of problem to be solved, but frequently it may not be. So there's like just more uncertainty around that, I see. And I think the other piece is, holy crap, the tech stack is in so much flux. And we all see that. You, like day in, day out, sit there with these technologies. I can't sit there day in, day out, but as you know, I play around a lot with this. And it's every day it's changing, and it's release cycles multiple times per day. Right? If you look at the LangChains and the Llama indexes and of the world, and all these models are getting, better every day, which is wonderful. Like, we love that. But every week there's a new model at the top of the leaderboard. Ben Lorica spoke about that in his keynote. I think he highlighted like 8 or 10 different models, but saying like there's a long tail of 20, 30, 40 more. And they all behave at the high level maybe similarly, but in the real world, with like in the details, it's lots of variability.
Yeah.
So between kind of the use case being a little bit more fuzzy just by the nature of new technology, between that on one hand, and on the flip side, the tech stack to implement it just being so fast moving and so many different pieces, there's just more, it's just harder to get it into real world production. And so I think that's probably kind of the high level of what's going on. And then I think there's a lot of things that we as vendors can do as kind of platform builders. And maybe we can talk about that like in a moment, but I think GraphRag is like one of the most common patterns for marrying up graphs and Gen AI. And I think that offers up a lot of advantages. It's not a silver bullet. Nothing is a silver bullet in technology. We've learned that over the years, right? But I do think that it offers up a lot of advantages that can help people get their projects into production in an easier and better way.
I think that's all sounds absolutely, I agree with all of that. And each one of the things you've said, it feels like there's a conversation to be had about.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And I will just add this from a kind of a developer perspective, like two aspects. Like, the pace of change within the tech stack, for sure we're seeing, to the point that I'm sure everyone out there has experienced this the same as I have, like when I'm giving a demo and I'm well prepared for the demo, and yet as I'm about to walk onto stage at some conference, I don't know if that demo will do what it did half an hour ago. Don't know. Between just the variability in the models themselves, but then also the change in the models. So the model behavior, you know, sometimes day to day, like if there's a new release that isn't necessarily a big release, it'll change. And then, of course, as well as you said, like on the tech stack level, there's, I think correctly, a lot of change, a lot of progress. It's like, let's get things done. Let's experiment with lots of different approaches, see what works, see what doesn't work. But if you've stayed with something from the beginning till now, you will have updated your code a dozen times just to keep up with the current release of things. Never mind, like this is a long tail release that's, you know, got support for 12 years. That's not a thing. We're all in that same spot right now.
But that's a good point. Like you added one more component that I didn't think of or didn't articulate, which is it's more kind of business use case uncertainty. Mm-hmm. The entire tech stack is changing more than what we usually see or more than we've ever seen. But what you added to it is also the core DNA here is probabilistic.
Yeah.
That's the new thing. Like that's one of the new dimensions that this brings to us. Like computers since von Neumann architecture, right? Which happened slightly before the napkin, the invention of the property graph model. Like the von Neumann architecture, the entire foundational piece of how computers work is deterministic. Mm. These models are probabilistic, right? So yeah. Even at the core DNA, even if like the use cases were as clear as is normally the case, even if the tech stack were more fixed and mature, the core DNA is just more, I guess we have probabilistic, more changing in its core.
And from a defensive coding position, some of those same practices come back. Like, don't assume the network is always there.
Right.
Also, don't assume the LLM is correct.
Right.
Right? Like, apply all that. Like, out of the gates, sure. There's a happy path. Oh my gosh, you've got something amazing working. From there to like, you know, back to this question about production. From there to production, there's a lot of extra work you need to do. I'm sure that came up in all of the talks. Not maybe most of the talks I'll say, right? Okay, let's get on some other things. I love this, of course. Oh, and you know, let's actually take this is the other aspect of this, that at the same time that we're dealing with trying to build, you know, on the technology side, and this is a developers conference, right? So we're all doing that. But for Gen AI, it isn't just in the bubble of tech, it is across everybody who's doing anything that is using tech. It is both a user-facing thing and a inside, you know, developer, you know, facing thing, both as a tech stack and also how you develop. How are you taking advantage of Gen AI yourself? And are you seeing Gen AI change how Neo4j does its business?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's exactly right. And I think it's unusual for a new disruptive technology to both be a component in the infrastructure layer. So in other words, a way of building new applications for developers, for builders, and at the same time being a consumer product for end users. We're both fathers. You have a daughter, I have daughters, plural. And my oldest daughter is using ChatGPT on a regular basis, right? And at the same time, the developers just on the other side of this wall here building Neo4j are using them, right? Yeah, so I'm very promiscuous. I play around with a lot of different tools and models. Probably I still default to OpenAI, to ChatGPT as a consumer. Just I think muscle memory, right? I do think they generally tend to be kind of the leading model provider, but it's exactly what Ben Lorica said kind of this morning. It's probably by a very, very narrow margin, right? But pretty good UX. I use Claude fairly frequently. I use Gemini, not as much as I want to because I'm in Europe now and it's a little bit hard to get access to it. But I do use kind of the Google tools and that kind of stuff, right? And for me, probably the number one use case is learning. And this, I think, is like a massive superpower for this thing, right? Where it's like, You take a new concept and you can get it explained to you in an individualized way. So for example, I'm really, really dumb about medical stuff. I don't understand medical jargon at all, right? And a friend of mine had like this diagnosis, and she was talking to me about it. And it had some hormone stuff in it and stuff like that. So we sat down and, like, with her permission, like, I uploaded kind of her medical records into ChatGPT and asked it to explain it to me. And it gave this amazing prose English explanation of what was actually going on that I didn't understand at all. Because it was still kind of medical language. So then I said, explain it to me like I'm a 15-year-old. And it explained it to me, and I still didn't understand it. So then I said, explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. And then I actually got it. It was just short of crayons and, and stuff like that. And so being able to get this personalized explanation of new concepts is fantastic. Now, the flip side is a lot of the stuff that I want to ask it about is very topical, right? It is about, I don't need to understand what was happening in retrieval augmented generation at the October 2023 cutoff date. That is ancient history. That is way back when dinosaurs ruled the earth in this universe. No, I need to understand the papers that came out the last few weeks, right? And as I'm driving to work, being able to have like a conversation, I get like use the conversational UX and it's harder because then it's really the parameterized memory. I can't sit there in the car and upload a bunch of articles and tell. So that's a little bit of a problem, the cutoff date for me. So it has to be more fundamental things. But big picture, that's probably my number one use case.
And I think inside of the company, it's fair to say, and I remember I was chatting with some of the engineers, here in the Neo4j office yesterday, that we're all using Copilot for coding. The way I think everybody probably here tuning in has at least used Copilot, tried it out. I don't know if you're using it on a daily basis. And I think with varying degrees. Like some people totally lean into it, and I should say maybe totally lean into it depending on what they're focusing on. That really came out a lot. Like we are all familiar with the kind of developer past habit of copy paste. You're like, oh my gosh, here's the thing I've got to do. I know it's been done before. I don't want to research it. Let me just find the code snippet.
Let's go to Stack Overflow.
Stack Overflow. There's the question that's been uploaded. Okay, I'm going to just assume that's correct. Copy, paste, try it, of course. You don't just push to production, right? But now, like that whole dynamic of copy, paste from Stack Overflow is just Copilot. Like either just a little comment here or like use whatever the interface might be that you prefer using. And then it just unfolds basically what is copy paste from like, I've seen that code before, I know what you're talking about, and it has the context of what particularly you're trying to do. It does a really good job. Me personally, I love it when I'm doing unit testing.
Right.
Because that is just, if you want to have great coverage, it's just like, okay, have I thought of all the different things? Do I have a data set? It's just a lot of copy, paste, change, copy, paste, change. Oh, here's some data. Can you just do unit tests around that? Done. And it's just like, good, decent code comes out of it. Obviously, you run it. And that has been a huge productivity boost so that you can focus on the interesting parts of the problem and less on the boilerplatey things, which is like the kind of classic for devs, like everyone hates the boilerplate stuff. That's what we have tooling just for that. A lot of that now has become, for me, I think, just encapsulated within the Copilot experience and in all the different variants of that.
And what do you personally use? Is it like GitHub Copilot? Is it kind of Replit, Cursor, whatever? What's IntelliJ? IntelliJ has what do you personally use for your Copilot stuff?
I'm on VS Code and I'm on Copilot, and I've been pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
I keep getting tempted over to the Cursor camp. I hear magical things about it.
Yeah, same.
And interestingly enough, like there's like just this, there's always a switching cost. I'm like, okay, this is working well enough for me. I don't want to like relearn the behaviors of that thing back to almost the predictability. Like I know what works and what doesn't with Copilot, so I know where the good things are, and I stay within the sweet spot, like what it does well. And maybe Cursor does more things well, but right now I'm like, okay, this is cool. So I'm happy here. Awesome. We'll go on for another question here. Okay, I'll come back to this one. We're first going to go on to, let's see. outside of Gen AI stuff, which we will talk about endlessly, obviously, we can talk about for a while, I'm going to cherry pick here a little bit because I love the backstory in this. You mentioned the napkin on the flight to Bombay, and I like the way this is phrased as well. Did deep thoughts go into the decision of calling it nodes and relationships as opposed to the technical terms vertices and edges?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and the answer is yes. I actually feel very strongly about this. I hate vertices and edges, that terminology, right? If you talk to most people in the world who are not graph geeks or math geeks, like a vertex, it's like, what is a vertex? It's not always intuitive to people, right? Like when in the DevOps world, when people talk about many machines, right? I deployed it across 50, no one says I deployed it across 50 vertices. They say 50 nodes, right? Nodes is a much more intuitive concept. And Peter will never probably acknowledge this, but I remember vividly when Peter Neubauer, one of the 3 co-founders, it's myself and Johan Svensson and Peter Neubauer, he came up to me and he had heard about vertices and edges, and he said, yeah, they call it vertices, the relationships. They call the relationships vertices. It's like, no. Like, they call, the vertices is the synonym for nodes. So even he got confused about it, right? So I think nodes is just a much more intuitive word than vertex. And then the other one, which is edges. I freaking hate edges, right? Edges, you cut yourself on edges, right? And even if you ask people to explain, if they talk about vertex and edge, and you ask them that what is an edge, almost always the way people explain an edge to someone is by saying it's the relationship between 2 things. So they even use the word relationship, so then let's just call it relationship. And relationships are warm, fuzzy. It is the foundation of life. This is why, if you can zoom in here, on this mug here, it says, we value relationships. I don't know if that's visible across, but we value relationships, which is, we have 6 core values at Neo4j. This is the first value, and they're not ordered, but this is the first among equals. This is, on some level, the meta value from which we derive everything that we do, how we behave, what products we build. We value relationships, right? And that's relationships in data, but it's relationships between people, it's relationships between the employees at Neo4j, between us and our community, us and our partners, us and our customers, us and our stakeholders, right? So relationships, I feel very strongly is the right word. And I find that there's some, I don't know, intellectual snobism sometimes in the graph world where people want to use fancy words. Like instead of a schema, we call it an ontology, right? And instead of nodes and relationship, we call it vertices and edges. And it makes it sound like much smarter and more sophisticated. I hate that. Let's just use as plain and easy language as possible and make it as easily accessible, the power of this technology, by just using terms that are more relatable. Now, the one argument that I agree with for calling it edge is that edge is 4 characters. So it's briefer. It's briefer to type, right? And I mean, I think that's convenient. That is valuable, right? But I don't think that in the end overweights kind of that's not valuable enough that it's worth calling it an edge with all the other baggage.
I really love the deep thinking that went into that. The insight there, I think, is absolutely valuable. And I'll actually draw from over in functional programming, which I think probably everyone has done some level of functional programming, heard about it, functions as a first-class citizen in your language, and maybe things like mapping and reducing, like little bits and pieces of functional programming. When you get deeper into functional programming, it very quickly goes off the edge of like mathematically precise terminology that is inexplicable. Like,
that's right.
What does that thing mean exactly? Like, and when you explain like how you use it and what it is, then it's great. There's often, if you happen to be a TypeScript programmer, there's a small library called Effect, which has taken on exactly this observation. and they borrowed it, to be fair, from other people as well. But they were like, okay, let's just, for each of these things, let's figure out what it actually does and call it the thing it does for programmers, not the thing that it is in the math. It's informed by the math, but it is useful for programming or for data or for use in everyday life. It is not obscure, it is part of everyday life. So let's use the things that explain things. And so they're studiously going through basically the entire canon of like functional programming, like, oh, let's rename things. Like unabashedly, like picking fights a little bit, but to make it approachable and understandable.
I love that.
In an everyday conversation, you don't have to have a cheat sheet next to you being like, oh, you mean this thing? You can just talk about the concepts because you know what you're talking about.
Love that.
Cool. All right. We have a few more minutes. Let's get to some other questions. And I'm going to still save this one for the very last one. And I'm going to back over actually just to Neo4j features for a second because we were talking about mostly Gen AI. And this one kind of says, let's step aside. Other than Gen AI features that we're adding, which everyone is doing Gen AI things, what are the most recent features Neo4j that has shipped that you're most excited about? Like,
Man, that's a tough one.
and I know you're picking amongst, equally favorite, they're all awesome.
I love Nomi and Leah and Ilse, my 3 daughters, and I love them equally. I mean, like literally, there's so much to choose from here. I picked out this favorite water bottle of mine, which says parallel runtime. And I love this category of features, which is we're changing something in the engine room. You, dear user, you have your code, right? And without you changing anything, the code is just faster or better, right? In some capacity. Parallel runtime is a great example of that. So that I think is really, really amazing.
Can I step in because I wanted to?
No, because I have so many more other features.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, let's do it.
Because I want to tie this back into the earlier conversation about like at the core we've got this unpredictability of the LLMs, and I'm sorry for bringing Gen AI back into the conversation, but between that and like the pace of change that's happening there, exactly what you just said, we're on the other side of that. We have a great surface for expressing how you think about and work with graphs. You don't have to change anything. The great new features of Neo4j are that Neo4j just keeps getting better without you having to rewrite your whole code base. Yeah. And yes, there are going to be extra features in the language. Some of that's coming up. But it'll be additive, not a hey, the thing you were just doing, stop that. We have to do something else instead. The stability, back to kind of the production kind of worthiness almost of this, I would say. The greatest feature is that like we're just making Neo4j better, easier to use, more accessible, cloud hosted, all those things. I know these are kind of softball, they're obvious things, but sometimes underappreciated, like when you're also at the other end facing this pace of change.
Yeah, so completely agree with that. And in the spirit of that, I would add probably like, we've done a lot of work this year on unifying the experience in Aura. And internally we call it UPX. I actually don't know how, maybe we don't even have a name for it, but like a unified experience in Aura. So like browser, Bloom, like these things fit together in a more comprehensive and smoother way. And I love that kind of stuff. We've done a lot of work on import. Ben Lorick in his keynote mentioned import from unstructured data. We call that the knowledge graph builder. We're also working on import that I don't know exactly how public this is. I think it's been released. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like early versions at least, which is like more structured import from things like Postgres, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's some early versions of that have been released, or maybe I've been playing around with internal stuff, or will be released. So I think that I love. And then I'll add a final favorite of mine, which is, I don't know what people think of, but like any work we're doing around a command line interface, a CLI, I freaking love, because it's back to having that kind of low friction, ergonomic, like interface between our product and the developer workflow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, yes, click, click, click. We love it all, but like having a CLI is just fundamental for that in my mind.
Love it. I love all those things. We're actually now out of time. We could go on for hours.
We will
Let
go
me check
on
with
for
the producers.
hours.
Maybe we can just cancel the rest of the nodes. We can just keep talking. No. There's lots of great material. So this has been the end of the first phase of nodes. We still have 2 other time zones, major time zones to go through. Europe is just going to start up in about a half an hour. And then after that, America is going to finally wake back up. And then we've got sessions there as well. We're going to be back for each of those as an end cap. If you're awake at that time, if you've got questions that we're going to leave these questions here. Add more questions. If you want to come back for those other slots, join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.